Hello and welcome to the Masonic Authors Guild International. This is Robert L.D. Cooper with Mark A. Tabert. We are Magi. Our mission is to promote the highest standards in education, research and publications relating to the global phenomenon of Freemasonry.
Kenyo Ismail, Part 2, Brazilian Freemasonry. 3.8 Content Analysis. As already discussed in this method, here will be represented the results of the categorizations and content analysis of the 7,818 answers to the open question, that is, most qualitative one, which consisted of the following, quote, how would you like to see Freemasonry in the 21st century? Unquote. The categories identified were as following. Figure 5, focus of the Brazilian Freemason by categories. This figure is similar to a table of organization with Brazilian Freemasons at the top divided into exterior forces consisting of 49% and interior forces consisting of 45%. Exterior forces include social action, philanthropy, and political activism. Interior forces represent Masonic education, modernization, preservation, union, great and strong, moralization, and selection. All others at the bottom of the tree represent 4.46% of other answers. Figure 6 categories then shows these categories in a large pie chart, with the largest slice of that pie being 39.4% of social acting. As can be seen, the categories were divided into two groups, one of categories whose focus is exterior of Freemasonry, and the others of categories with an internal focus. Those with an outward focus indicate greater concern of Freemasons and how Freemasonry presents itself or acts in society as a cell of organized civil society. On the other hand, those focused on the interior reveal a greater concern of Masons with the problems, points of attention, or priority issues perceived by them within the institution. Below is a brief report of the analysis of each category, accompanied by real phrases from respondents selected to represent the other answers classified in the category. 3.81 Outer Focus. Categories in which the concerns of the participants with the presentation and performance of Freemasonry before society predominates. They are social action, political activism, and charity. 3.8.1.1 Category Social Action. The Freemasons of this category, who represent the largest portion, approximately 40%, of all participants, want a Freemasonry more focused on social action in a more generic way, that is, not only through philanthropy, but mainly in a more quote-unquote macro way, such as through the development of large social programs in sectors such as education, health, public safety, income distribution, intolerances, and prejudices. They show some resistance to the involvement of Freemasonry with politics, and they believe that Brazilian Freemasonry is too quote-unquote theoretical and not very quote-unquote practical, and should act more quote-unquote quote outside the temple unquote. These understandings in the sense demonstrate that there is no way to quote make humanity happy unquote without social action. The most used terms were quote-unquote active and quote-unquote proactive and participative unquote. Some direct quotes from selected answers in this category include quote, more participatory in social issues such as public security, education, and health, less concerned about getting closer to government institutions, unquote. Quote, I would like to see a Freemasonry more engaged in social problems, less interested or at least more impartial towards the political class of all levels. Quote, more active in issues that affect the population in general, such as democracy, education, health, public security, eradications of the level of poverty, etc. Unquote. 3.8.1.2 Category Political Activism. The group of this category, formed by 8.11% of the participants, probably impacted by the series of corruption scandals at the federal level that have, since 2016, occupied the national media. Also, the fact that this year, that is 2018, is an election year, with elections at the federal and state levels, aspire to a Brazilian Freemasonry more focused on political activism, seeking to elect political Freemasons and expelling from their ranks Freemason politicians involved in corruption. They believe that Freemasonry can assert its ethics into the legislative houses through elected brothers and, thus, resume its position as one of the protagonists of the Brazilian political elite as it was in the 19th century. The most common used terms were, quote-unquote, corruption, quote-unquote, politics, quote-unquote, politicians, and quote-unquote, ethics. Some direct quotes from selected answers in the category. Quote, as our country is going through a very serious political phase, I would like a more active Freemasonry in the political field, unquote. Participating closely in political life and rigorously demanding the political Freemasons guide their acts according to what they have learned from the order, unquote. Quote, acting in a systematic way through Masonic representatives in Brazilian politics, because if it is by this means that actions that impact the evolution of our country are achieved, then that is where we should be. Each city, each state should have the largest possible number of Freemasons in politics, unquote. 3.8.1.3 Category Philanthropy. This category yearns for a Freemasonry more concerned with others, especially needy communities. They believe that only in this way, acting directly with those who need it most, Freemasonry can collaborate directly with the happiness of humanity. The profile of this category is very close to that of the social action category in terms of being, in general, against the involvement of Freemasonry with profane politics and believing that Freemasonry needs to act outside its temples as well. For these reasons, this category can also be considered a subcategory of social action. The most used terms were philanthropy, charity, humanity, and needy. Some direct quotes from selected answers in this category are, quote, more committed to society and working on its maximum virtue, which is philanthropy, seeking more effective ways to build a fairer, more honest, and more equal country, unquote. Quote, a society of good morals, of good men that does good to humanity through the practice of charity, unquote. Quote, with more philanthropy, good men, without fanaticism for politics, religion, and football, unquote. 3.8.2 Inner Focus. These are the categories that concentrated the responses' greatest concerns with the problems, points of attention, or priority issues perceived by them within the institution. 3.8.2.1 Category Masonic Formation. Almost 5% of the respondents expect Brazilian Freemasonry to turn more to Masonic training, assuming itself as a school of morality and social ethics and fulfilling its institutional mission of improving Freemasons so that they can make a difference in their communities. This group is bothered by the existing Masonic policy for the dispute of positions and credits this to the vanity of the Freemasons, understanding that this reflects the deficiencies or absence of a quality Masonic education, which has been, in their opinions, neglected by the Grand Lodges and Grand Orients and, consequently, by the Lodges. The most used terms were formation, instruction, study, moral, and intellectual. Some direct quotes from selected answers in this category are, quote, with less politicking, more fraternal and carrying out actions in favor of the training of Freemasons. Today, the studies are the responsibility of the Lodge, which most of the time has no basis, unquote. Quote, a Freemasonry focused on study, knowledge. A Freemasonry that explores debate, discussion, and contradiction, that he dares, that he leaves his comfort zone, that understands that we are not a service club, that our raw material is the light of knowledge, our contribution is to expand minds, unquote. quote, fulfilling its true purpose to instruct the Mason man to become better, and the ability to contribute to the improvement of society, without political involvement, especially within the Grand Lodges, unquote. 3.8.2.2 Category, Great and Strong. The Freemasons who made up this category are concerned with the quantitative future of Brazilian Freemasonry. They believe that Freemasonry may not be attractive to the new generations, are concerned about the high rates of voluntary evasion, and want Freemasonry to be strengthened in its quantity in order to guarantee its future and social relevance. The most used terms were large, strong, largest, evasion. Some direct quotes from selected answers in this category. Quote, I would like to see the stores fuller, less sleeping siblings. Freemasonry with purpose and making men better for our future, leaving aside individual and political interest and prioritizing the commons, unquote. Quote, a more professional Freemasonry, stronger, a greater confederation in society, contributing to the well-being of the community in a more effective way, unquote. Quote, strong, active, respected by all, a reference for the whole society, an example that all brothers think about the interest of all and not only the individual interests, unquote. 3.8.2.3 Category, Modernization. The category modernization concentrates a little more than 3% of the brothers participating in the survey who declared a desire for Freemasonry to undergo modernization in the coming years. This modernization would be more focused on administrative, communicative, and didactic aspects, including the format of the meetings. In the comments, there is a concern with the technological and pragmatic profile of the new generations in the face of the outdated image that Freemasonry has. In other words, just like the members of the quote-unquote big and strong category, the concern of this group is with the future of Freemasonry. However, the modernization group argues that this organizational update is the solution. The most used terms were evolve, modernize, technology, and update. Some direct quotes from selected answers in this category. Quote, less dull, less overloaded with symbology, following the evolution of society so as not to die, considering the proposal of Grand Lodges of the USA with lean rights and rapid evolution in the degrees, unquote. Quote, maintaining its traditions but modernizing itself in the way of communicating, in the way of relating and interacting with its people, in decentralization and allowing everyone to actually participate, unquote. Quote, with the real practice of the concept of brotherhood, more humanistic and less mystical, dealing with current and future issues using available technologies so that we can evolve without just looking and speaking nostalgically of a glorious past, unquote. Quote, I wish Freemasonry is less repetitive and boring. Boring meetings and the instructional system is just stupid, unquote. 3.8.2.4 Category, Moralization. This category, entitled Moralization, the third most concentrated amongst all the 10 valid categories, concentrating almost 13% of the answers, highlights a dissatisfaction with the current Freemasonry, aiming at an improvement for the coming years through internal cleansing, achieved through an awareness and transformation of the current members and exclusive of those who maintain a moral standard below the expected in the Masonic environment. The word vanity, registered by many members of the group, quote, Masonic formation, unquote, as one of the evils that plague current Freemasonry, appears even more frequently and prominently in this category of moralization. The difference is that while this category focuses on highlighting the need to combat vanity in the Masonic environment, the category of quote-unquote Masonic formation pointed to the improvement in Masonic education as a solution to this problem. The most used terms were good manners, humility, seriousness, and vanity. Some direct quotes from selected answers to this category. Quote, that men who claim to be men of good morals would stop their egos of being Freemasons. Honor Freemasons with virtues, without lies, with seriousness, sparkle in their eyes, and really have good morals, honesty and shame in their faces." Unquote. Quote, "As a more serious and fraternal institution where brothers who had problems in the justice system could not attend meetings and stayed away until their problems were solved." Unquote. Quote, "May the brothers be less vain, presumptuous, less ambitious, and more prepared, far from party politics, fairer and less prejudiced." Unquote. Quote, "May the fraternity be more transparent with brothers, being less complacent with members that do not comply with Masonic laws." Unquote. This podcast is for educational purposes and perhaps entertainment. While the Masonic Authors Guild International provides the most accurate information possible, listeners use this information at their own risk. This podcast and its contents are Magi's and Kenyo Ismail's property, as are all the opinions and information it presents. Robert L.D. Cooper's, Mark A. Tabert's, and Kenyo Ismail's views and opinions within the podcast do not represent nor speak for Freemasonry, any Masonic organization, the former or current employers, in any way, shape, or form. Magi, Cooper, Tabert, or Ismail will not compensate you in any way whatsoever if you ever happen to suffer an inconvenience due to the information herein contained.